Nancy had been working the night shift at Mercy General Hospital for 3 years. She thought she'd seen everything until she was assigned to the psychiatric wing's fourth floor, the floor that had been closed for renovations for over a decade. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, handed her a single key and a clipboard with just one name: Room 412, Patient M. Holloway. "Just check on him every 2 hours," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Don't engage in conversation. Don't listen to what he says. Just mark the chart and leave." Nancy found this odd, but night shift was full of strange protocols. She took the elevator to the fourth floor, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Most rooms were sealed with plastic sheeting, but room 412 had its door slightly ajar. She knocked softly and entered. The patient was an elderly man, maybe 70, sitting perfectly still in a chair by the window. He didn't acknowledge her presence. Nancy marked her chart and left, thinking this would be an easy assignment. At 2 a.m., she returned for her second check. This time, the man was facing the door, as if he'd been waiting. His eyes were completely black. Not just the pupils, but the entire eye. "You're not supposed to be here," he whispered. "Neither am I." Nancy backed toward the door, but it slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked. "I died in 1987, the man continued, his voice growing younger with each word. "Car accident on Highway 9. But something went wrong. I woke up here, and I've been waiting for someone to take my place." The room began to grow cold. Nancy's breath came out in visible puffs. The man stood up, and she realized he wasn't touching the floor. He was floating inches above it. "The hospital keeps me here," he said, his voice now that of a child. "They know what I am. They know what happens to people who work this floor too long." Nancy frantically tried the door handle. It wouldn't budge. Behind her, she heard a sound like static electricity, followed by a whisper, "Look at me." Against every instinct, she turned around. The man was gone. In his place stood a mirror, but her reflection wasn't alone. Standing behind her was a woman in a nurse's uniform, her face twisted in silent screaming. The door suddenly opened. Nancy ran out, not stopping until she reached the elevator. She pressed the button repeatedly, but the elevator wouldn't come. She looked at the floor indicator. It was moving between floors 4 and 5, over and over, as if it were stuck. Finally, the doors opened. Inside was Mrs. Chen, holding the same clipboard. "How was your first night?" she asked, but her voice sounded far away. Nancy looked at her reflection in the elevator's polished walls. She was wearing a different uniform, an old-fashioned nurse's outfit she'd never seen before. Mrs. Chen smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Don't worry," she said. "You'll get used to it. We all do, eventually." The elevator descended, but according to the floor indicator, they were going down to floors that shouldn't exist. Basement 4, basement 5, basement 6. Nancy tried to press the button for the ground floor, but her hand passed right through it. When the doors opened, Nancy found herself back on the 4th floor. Room 412's door was open, and she could see the chair by the window. But now, someone was sitting in it. Someone wearing a nurse's uniform exactly like hers. Mrs. Chen handed her the clipboard. "Just check on her every 2 hours," she said. "Don't engage in conversation. Don't listen to what she says. Just mark the chart and leave." Nancy looked at the clipboard. The name had changed. Room 412, patient S. Mitchell. Her own name. She looked at her hands. They were becoming translucent. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She had become the patient, and somewhere, a new nurse was getting ready for her first shift on the 4th floor. The cycle would continue. It always did. Marcus specialized in abandoned places, empty hospitals, forgotten schools, derelict houses. His Instagram account had over 200,000 followers who loved his haunting photography. But the house on Elm Street would be his final shoot. He'd heard about the property from a local historian. The Crane family had lived there for 3 generations until 1994, when they all disappeared overnight. The house had been empty ever since. No one would buy it, no one would tear it down. It just sat there, waiting. Marcus arrived at sunset, his camera gear in tow. The house looked ordinary enough, a 2-story colonial with peeling paint and overgrown gardens. But as he approached, he noticed something odd. Every window in the house was covered from the inside, but he could see light seeping through the cracks. He pushed open the front door. It wasn't locked. It never was, according to local stories. The inside was frozen in time. Dinner plates still sat on the kitchen table. Children's toys were scattered across the living room floor. A newspaper dated October 15th, 1994, lay open on the coffee table. Marcus began taking pictures. Through his camera lens, everything looked normal, but when he looked with his naked eye, he could swear he saw movement in his peripheral vision. Shadows that didn't match any objects in the room. He climbed the stairs to the second floor. The family photos lining the stairwell showed the Cranes, parents Robert and Ellen, children Amy and Tommy. But in every photo, there was something wrong with their eyes. They were all looking in the same direction, toward the camera, but their expressions were terrified. The master bedroom was at the end of the hall. Marcus pushed open the door and found something that made his blood run cold. The bed was made, but there was a perfect outline of 2 bodies pressed into the mattress. The impressions were deep, as if someone had been lying there for years. He raised his camera and took a shot. The flash illuminated the room for a split second, and in that moment, he saw them, Robert and Ellen Crane, lying in the bed, their eyes wide open, staring at him. But when the flash faded, they were gone. Marcus checked the photo on his camera's LCD screen. The bed appeared empty in the image, but in the corner of the frame, he could see a figure standing in the doorway behind him, a figure that hadn't been there when he took the shot. He spun around. The hallway was empty, but now he could hear voices, children's voices, coming from downstairs. They were singing a lullaby he never heard before, but somehow knew all the words to. Marcus descended the stairs, following the sound. The voices led him to the basement door. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it stood open, revealing wooden steps leading down into darkness. The singing was coming from below. He turned on his camera's flash and descended. The basement was larger than the house above, stretching far beyond what should have been possible. The walls were covered with hundreds of photographs, all of them showing the same thing. Marcus, in this house, taking pictures. But these weren't photos he had taken. In them, he looked different, older, thinner. In some, he appeared to be crying. He looked different, older, thinner. In others, he looked angry. But in all of them, he looked angry. But in all of them, he looked angry. But in all of them, he was alone in the house, photographing the same rooms over and over. At the end of the basement, he found a dark room. Red light filtered through the doorway, and he could hear the sound of chemicals bubbling. He peered inside and saw a figure developing photographs in the chemical baths. It was himself, but this version looked like he'd been working for days without sleep. The other Marcus looked up and smiled. "Finally," he said. "I've been waiting for you to find me. Do you know how long I've been trapped here, taking the same pictures over and over?" "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "I just got here." "Time works differently in this house," the other Marcus replied. "You've been here for weeks, months, maybe years. Every time you try to leave, you end up back at the front door. But you never remember. You just keep taking pictures."
Marcus looked at his camera. The memory cards showed 10,000 photos, but he remembered taking only a few dozen. He scrolled through them rapidly. They were all of the same house, the same rooms, taken from slightly different angles. The timestamps showed they spanned several months. "The Crane family's still here," the other Marcus continued. "They've been here since 1994, and they're lonely. They want people to stay with them, to become part of their family. And once you're here, you can't leave. You become part of the house. Marcus ran toward the stairs, but they seemed to stretch forever. He climbed and climbed, but never reached the top. Behind him, he could hear the other Marcus laughing. "You can't escape by running," he called. "The only way out is to stop taking pictures. But you can't stop, can you? It's who you are." He was right. Even as Marcus tried to flee, he found himself raising his camera, taking shots of the endless staircase. The flash illuminated the walls, and he saw that they were covered with more photos, all of them showing people like him, photographers who had come to document the house and never left. When Marcus finally reached the top of the stairs, he found himself back in the basement. The other Marcus was gone, but the dark room was still there, and now Marcus could feel the irresistible urge to develop his photos, to see what he had captured. He entered the dark room and began the process. As the images appeared in the chemical baths, he saw the truth. In every single photo, the Crane family was visible. Not as ghosts or spirits, but as they had been in life. And they were all looking at him with the same expression of desperate longing. The last photo showed the current moment, Marcus in the dark room, developing pictures. But standing behind him were Robert, Ellen, Amy, and Tommy Crane, and they were smiling. Marcus turned around, but he already knew what he would find. The family was there, reaching out to him with welcoming arms. "Stay with us," Ellen whispered. "Become part of our family." As their hands touched his shoulders, Marcus felt his memories of the outside world fading away. His Instagram account, his followers, his life before the house. It all became distant and unimportant. What mattered was staying here, with the Cranes, taking pictures of their home for all eternity. Somewhere in the world, another photographer was hearing about an abandoned house on Elm Street. Soon they would come to investigate, and Marcus would be waiting for them, ready to explain how time works differently in the house, ready to welcome them to their new family. The cycle would continue. It always did. Jake worked the night shift at Soundwave Communications, a small phone company that handled overflow calls for larger businesses. Most nights were quiet. A few wrong numbers, some automated messages, nothing exciting. But on October 31st, 2019, he received a call that would change everything. It was 3:17 a.m. when the phone rang. Jake glanced at the caller ID, but it showed only static. He picked up anyway. "Soundwave Communications, this is Jake." Silence for a moment, then a woman's voice, distant and filled with static. "Is this the emergency line?" "No, ma'am, this is a business service. If you need emergency help, please call 911. "I can't," the voice replied. "My phone only connects to your number. I've been trying to call for help for I don't know how long. Something's wrong with time here." Jake frowned. "Where are you calling from?" "I don't know. I was driving home from work and I got lost. I've been driving for hours, but I keep passing the same landmarks over and over. The same gas station, the same billboard, the same dead deer on the side of the road. And my phone, it only dials your number." The woman's voice was becoming clearer, more desperate. "My name is Linda Morrison. I work at First National Bank on Riverside Drive. I was driving home around 6 p.m. and I took a wrong turn. But this isn't just being lost. Something's very wrong here." Jake pulled up his computer, ready to help. "Okay, Linda, let me see if I can patch you through to local authorities. What's your license plate number?" "XJK4429. But listen, you need to understand something. I don't think I'm in the same world anymore. I've been driving on this road for hours and the sun hasn't moved. It's stuck at sunset. And there are things moving in the trees that aren't animals." The connection crackled with static. Jake could hear engine noise in the background and something else, a low humming sound, like electrical wires. "Linda, I'm going to try to trace your call. Keep talking to me. I see a sign ahead. It says, "Welcome to Millbrook, population 847. But I've passed this sign 6 times now. Each time the population number changes. First it was 847, then 846, then 845. Now it says 843. Something's happening to the people here." Jake's trace was coming back with impossible results. The call was originating from a location that didn't exist. Coordinates that placed Linda's position in the middle of a lake that had been drained 30 years ago. "There's something else," Linda continued. "I'm not the only one driving this road. There are other cars, but they're all old, like really old. I just passed a car that looked like it was from the 1950s. The driver waved at me, but his face, it was like a photograph, flat, not real." The humming sound was getting louder. Jake could hear it clearly now through the phone. "Linda, I want you to pull over. Stop the car."
"I can't. The steering wheel won't turn. The brakes don't work. The car is driving itself, and I'm just along for the ride." Jake's computer was showing more impossible data. According to the system, Linda Morrison had died in a car accident 3 years ago. Her car had gone off the road during a thunderstorm, and her body was found in Millbrook Lake. But the lake had been drained in 1989. "Linda," Jake said carefully, "what year do you think it is?" 2019, October 31st. "I remember because it's Halloween and I was supposed to hand out candy tonight. My neighbors are probably wondering where I am." "Linda, I need you to look at your dashboard. What does the clock say?" A pause. That's not possible. It says 6:47 p.m., but I've been driving for hours. The clock should have changed." Jake's hands were shaking now. He pulled up the old accident report. Linda Morrison, age 34, had died at 6:47 p.m. on October 31st, 2016, when her car skidded off the road during a Halloween storm. She had been driving home from her job at First National Bank. "The sign changed again," Linda said. "Population 842. Every time I pass it, the number goes down. I think each car that passes takes someone away." "Linda, listen to me very carefully. Do you remember anything about a storm? About your car going off the road?"
"No, there's no storm. The weather is perfect. Clear skies, no wind. But the trees, they're moving without any breeze. And they're reaching toward the road, like they're trying to grab the cars." Jake realized he was dealing with something beyond his understanding, but he also realized that Linda might not be the only one. He began searching through old call logs, looking for similar reports. He found them, dozens of them, all from the same location that didn't exist, all from people who had died in car accidents on Halloween night, all still driving that endless road, all watching the population counter decrease. "Linda, there are others like you, other drivers who've called this number. They're all people who died in car accidents on Halloween night." "That's impossible. I'm not dead. I'm talking to you right now." But as Linda spoke, her voice was becoming fainter, more distant. The static was increasing. "The population sign just changed to 841, she whispered. I think I understand now. Each time we pass the sign, one of us disappears. One of us finally moves on, and eventually, the road will be empty." "Linda, don't hang up. Stay on the line. I can see the end of the road ahead. There's a light. A bright, warm light, and the humming is getting softer. I think this is where I'm supposed to go. Linda, thank you for staying with me, for listening. I was so scared driving alone, but now I know I'm not alone. You're here with me." The line went quiet except for the humming, which was slowly fading away. "Linda, are you still there?" "Population 840, she whispered, her voice now barely audible. "I'm going toward the light now. Don't be afraid if someone else calls. Help them like you helped me. Help them find their way home." The line went dead. Jake sat in silence for a long time. Then he began preparing. He created a file folder labeled Halloween Road Calls and placed it next to his phone. Inside, he put instructions for future operators. Be kind, be patient, help them find the light. Because he knew Linda Morrison wasn't the last driver on that road. And next Halloween, his phone would ring again. Someone else would be lost, driving the same eternal highway, watching the population counter decrease, waiting for someone to help them find their way home. The cycle would continue. It always did. The antique shop on Maple Street had been closed for 15 years, but Emily could see lights moving inside whenever she walked past at night. As a local historian, she was curious about the building's past. What she discovered would make her wish she'd never asked. The shop had belonged to Heinrich Zimmermann, a German immigrant who'd arrived in town in 1952. He was a skilled craftsman who made custom dolls for the wealthy families in the area, but according to town records, something had gone wrong in 1978. The shop had closed abruptly and Zimmermann had disappeared. Emily obtained the keys from the property management company and entered the shop on a gray Tuesday morning. The inside was exactly as it had been left. Shelves lined with hundreds of dolls, all staring down at her with glass eyes that seemed to follow her movement. But it was the workshop in the back that made her blood run cold. On the main workbench sat an unfinished doll, its porcelain face half painted, its body waiting for arms. Next to it lay a leather-bound journal, open to an entry dated October 15, 1978. Emily began to read. Anna is getting stronger. She speaks to me now, tells me what she needs. The other dolls are jealous, but Anna was always my favorite. She was the first one I made after Margaret died, and I put so much love into her creation. Perhaps too much love. Emily flipped to earlier entries. Heinrich had lost his daughter Margaret in a car accident in 1965. Grief-stricken, he'd begun making dolls that resembled her, trying to capture her essence in porcelain and fabric. But as the journal continued, the entries became more disturbing. Anna moved today. I saw her shift positions while I was working. When I looked directly at her, she was still. But I know what I saw. Margaret's spirit is growing stronger within her. Emily looked at the dolls surrounding her. They were all variations of the same girl. Blonde hair, blue eyes, around 8 years old. All of them looked like they could be the same child at different ages. The other children in town are afraid of Anna. They won't play with her anymore. They say she whispers things to them, tells them secrets about the dead. But I know she's just lonely. She misses her friends from before. Emily found a photograph tucked between the journal pages. It showed Heinrich with a young girl, presumably Margaret. But standing next to them was a doll that looked exactly like the child, wearing the same dress, the same expression. The doll's eyes seemed to be looking directly at the camera. Anna asked me to make her friends today. She's been alone for so long and she needs playmates. I've started work on companions for her. Sarah will be first, then Emma, then little Jessica. Anna has described them all to me in perfect detail. Emily looked around the workshop with new understanding. The dolls weren't random creations. They were specific children, recreated in porcelain and fabric. She grabbed the local newspaper archives from 1978 and began searching. Her heart stopped. Sarah Hendricks, age 7, reported missing October 10, 1978. Emma Rodriguez, age 6, disappeared October 12. Jessica Wong, age 8, vanished October 14. All of them have been found weeks later, but something had been wrong with them. They've been catatonic, unresponsive, as if their minds had been somewhere else. The journal's final entry was dated October 15, 1978. I understand now. Anna doesn't want doll friends. She wants real friends. She's been taking pieces of the children, their memories, their personalities, their souls, and bringing them here. The dolls are just vessels holding what she's stolen from them. But I can't let her continue. I won't be responsible for what she's become. Emily heard a sound behind her, a soft rustling like fabric moving. She turned around and saw that one of the dolls had fallen from its shelf. It was lying on the floor, its arms reaching toward her, its mouth slightly open as if it were about to speak. She picked up the doll, and the moment her fingers touched its porcelain face,
She was overwhelmed by a flood of memories that weren't her own. She saw herself as a young girl, playing in a garden, laughing with friends, running through fields of flowers, but these weren't her memories. They belonged to someone else, someone who had been trapped in the doll for over 40 years. "Help me," a voice whispered. It was coming from the doll in her hands. "I'm Sarah. I want to go home." Emily dropped the doll, but it didn't break. Instead, it sat up by itself, its glass eyes focusing on Emily's face. "Anna won't let us leave," the doll continued. "She keeps us here, makes us play her games, but we're tired. We want to rest." One by one, the other dolls began to move. They climbed down from their shelves, surrounding Emily in a circle. Each one whispered a name: Emma, Jessica, Mary, Rebecca. Dozens of names spanning decades, all of them children who had encountered Anna and lost pieces of themselves. "Where is Anna?" Emily asked.
The dolls pointed toward the back of the workshop, where a closed door led to what Emily had assumed was a storage room. She approached it carefully, the dolls following behind her like a miniature funeral procession. Inside the room, she found Anna. Unlike the other dolls, Anna was life-sized, seated in a rocking chair, wearing a dress that looked like it had been made from real fabric rather than doll clothing. Her eyes were closed, but Emily could see her chest rising and falling, as if she were breathing. "She's dreaming," whispered Sarah, "dreaming of when she was alive, but her dreams are fed by our memories. The more children she takes, the more real she becomes." Emily understood. Heinrich had put so much love and grief into creating Anna that she'd become something more than a doll. She'd become a vessel for his daughter's spirit. But Margaret had been dead for 13 years when Anna was created. The thing that inhabited the doll wasn't really Margaret. It was something else, something that fed on the innocence and memories of living children. "How do we stop her?" Emily asked. "The fire," the dolls whispered in unison. "Heinrich tried to burn us all, but Anna stopped him. She made him disappear. But if someone else could finish what he started." Emily looked around the room. In the corner, she found Heinrich's remains, or what was left of them. His skeleton was seated in a chair, his hand still clutching a box of matches. On the wall above him was a message written in what looked like charcoal. "Forgive me, Margaret. I created a monster."
I don't take it off. Anna's eyes opened. They were the same blue as Margaret's in the photograph, but there was something ancient and hungry in them. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, her voice that of a child, but with the cadence of something much older. "This is my playroom. These are my friends." "They're not your friends," Emily replied. "They're children you've stolen from. They want to go home." Anna stood up from the rocking chair, and Emily realized she was growing. The doll was becoming larger, more solid, more real. "I don't want to be alone anymore," Anna said. "I've been alone for so long. Won't you be my friend too?" Emily felt a tugging sensation, as if something were trying to pull her memories away. She saw flashes of her childhood, playing with her sister, her first day of school, her mother's hugs. But the memories were fading, becoming distant, as if they belonged to someone else. "No," Emily said firmly. She pulled out her phone and activated the flashlight, shining it directly at Anna. The doll recoiled, hissing like a cat. "You can't have my memories, and you can't keep theirs." She grabbed Heinrich's box of matches and struck one. The flame seemed unnaturally bright in the dim room. Anna shrieked and lunged toward her, but Emily was ready. She threw the match at the rocking chair, and the fabric burst into flames. The fire spread quickly, consuming the dolls one by one, but as each doll burned, Emily could hear voices, children's voices, saying thank you and goodbye. The stolen memories were being released, returning to their owners, or finally finding peace. Anna was the last to burn. As the flames reached her, she looked at Emily with an expression of profound sadness. "I just wanted to live again," she whispered. "I just wanted to be real."
"You were real," Emily said. "But you are also dead, and the dead need to rest." The fire consumed Anna completely, and with her destruction, the oppressive atmosphere in the shop lifted. Emily felt lighter, as if a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been removed. She left the shop as it burned, calling the fire department from a safe distance. The official report would say the fire was caused by old electrical wiring, but Emily knew the truth. The dollmaker's daughter had finally found peace, and the children she'd trapped were free. But as Emily walked away, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She turned back once and saw a figure in the window of the burning shop, a man in old-fashioned clothes, raising his hand in what might have been a farewell or a warning. Heinrich Zimmermann had finally been able to finish what he'd started. His daughter could rest now, and the cycle of stolen childhoods was broken. But Emily knew that somewhere else, another grieving parent might be creating something they couldn't control. The cycle would continue, just in a different place, with different players. It always did.
The Meridian office building was scheduled for demolition in 2 weeks, but security guard David Chen had to work the night shift until the very end. He'd been guarding empty buildings for 5 years, and they all felt the same after a while, hollow, forgotten, full of echoes from their former lives. But the Meridian was different. For one thing, the elevator on the east side still worked, even though the power had been cut to most of the building. For another, it sometimes stopped at floors that didn't exist. David first noticed the problem on his third night. He was doing his rounds when he heard the elevator chime. This was odd, since he was the only person in the building, and he hadn't called for it. He walked over to investigate and saw that the elevator was opening on the 14th floor, but the Meridian only had 12 floors. David pressed the call button and the elevator descended to the ground floor. When the doors opened, he could see that the floor buttons inside were different from what he remembered. There were buttons for floors 13 through 18, floors that definitely didn't exist. He stepped inside and examined the button panel more closely. The buttons felt real, solid, and when he pressed 13, the elevator began to rise. It climbed past the 12th floor, past where the roof should be, and kept going. The doors opened onto a floor that was identical to the others in the building. Same carpet, same fluorescent lighting, same office doors. But this floor was occupied. David could see light coming from under the doors, and he could hear the sounds of office work, typing, phone calls, printers running.
He walked down the hallway, checking the nameplates on the doors. The names were all familiar. Johnson and Associates, the law firm that had been on the 3rd floor. Morrison Insurance from the 5th floor. Techno Solutions from the 8th floor. But these companies had all moved out months ago. David knocked on the door of Johnson and Associates. "Hello? Building security?" A woman's voice answered from inside. "Come in, Mr. Chen. We've been expecting you." David opened the door and found himself in a busy law office. 3 women in business suits were working at computers, taking phone calls, filing documents. They looked up at him and smiled, but their smiles didn't reach their eyes. "You're new," said the woman at the reception desk. "Most security guards don't find us until their 3rd week." "This floor doesn't exist," David said. "The building only has 12 floors." "That's what they tell people," the woman replied. "But buildings have a way of growing when they need to. This one needed extra space for the people who couldn't leave." David looked around the office. Everything seemed normal, but something felt wrong. The air was too still, the light too bright, and the sounds from the other offices seemed to be on a loop. The same phone conversation, the same typing rhythm, over and over. "What do you mean, people who couldn't leave?" The woman stood up and walked over to him. As she got closer, David noticed that she was slightly translucent, like a projection. Some people become so attached to their work that they can't let go, even after they die. This building gives them a place to continue.
You're all dead? Car accidents? Heart attacks? Cancer? The usual things. But we died thinking about our work, worried about our clients, concerned about projects we'd never finish. So we stayed. David backed toward the door. I need to go. Of course you do, but you'll be back. Security guards always come back. It's in your nature to investigate, to make sure everything is safe, and we'll be here when you return. David ran back to the elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. But the elevator went down past the first floor, past the basement, descending into levels that shouldn't exist. The lights flickered and David could hear voices in the walls, whispers, cries, the sound of people who were lost. The elevator finally stopped and the doors opened onto a floor that was completely dark. David used his flashlight to explore. The hallway was the same as the others, but the office doors were different. These doors were old, made of heavy wood with frosted glass windows. The nameplates showed businesses from decades past. Hartwell & Sons, established 1962. Meridian Insurance, founded 1954. Blackwood Real Estate, since 1949. David realized he was looking at the history of the building. Every business that had ever operated here had left something behind, and that something was still working, still trying to fulfill obligations that had ended decades ago. He walked down the hallway, his flashlight beam revealing more doors, more businesses, stretching back further and further in time. Some of the nameplates were so old he could barely read them, but behind each door he could hear the sounds of activity, typewriters, adding machines, the ring of old-fashioned telephones.
At the end of the hallway, David found a door marked Building Management, Maxwell Construction, 1947. This was the company that had built the Meridian. David knocked and the door opened by itself. Inside he found a man in a 1940s style suit, hunched over blueprints and architectural plans. The man looked up as David entered. "Mr. Chin," he said, "I'm Robert Maxwell, the original architect. I've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" "Every building needs a guardian, someone to watch over it and make sure it's safe. That's what security guards do, isn't it? You protect the building and everyone in it." David looked at the blueprints on the desk. They showed the Meridian as it was supposed to be, 12 floors, nothing more. But overlaid on the original plans were dozens of additional floors, stretching both up and down, creating a structure that existed in more dimensions than the physical world allowed. "The building is dying," Maxwell continued. "They're going to tear it down in 2 weeks, but all the people who worked here, all the businesses that called this place home, they don't want to leave. They're holding on, creating new spaces for themselves, trying to preserve what they built. But they're all dead. Death is just another kind of moving day. Some people adjust to their new addresses, and some people refuse to change their mailing address. The people in this building are the ones who refuse to move on." David felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you want from me?"
I want you to help them. When the building is demolished, they'll have nowhere to go. They'll be truly lost, wandering between worlds with no anchor, no home base. But if someone were to stay with them, to become part of the building's spirit, they could survive the transition. You want me to die. Not die, Maxwell said. Transform, become something more than human. Become the eternal guardian of this place, no matter where it exists. David looked at the blueprints again. He could see now that they were moving, shifting, showing different configurations of the building. Some showed it as it was, others as it could be, and still others as it existed in the spaces between reality. What happens if I refuse? Then in 2 weeks, when the wrecking ball hits, hundreds of souls will be scattered to the wind. They'll become lost spirits, haunting random locations, never finding peace. But if you accept, you can guide them to a new home, a new version of the Meridian that exists outside a physical space. David thought about his life outside the building. He lived alone in a small apartment, had no close friends, no family. His job was the only thing that gave his life meaning, and that job was ending in 2 weeks anyway. How do I know you're telling the truth? Maxwell smiled sadly. Look at your reflection in the window. David turned toward the window behind Maxwell's desk. In the glass, he could see himself, but he was wearing a different uniform, one that looked like it was from the 1940s, and standing behind him were dozens of other security guards, all from different eras,
all wearing the uniforms of their respective times.
"You're not the first security guard to work this building," Maxwell explained. "And you won't be the last. Each one has faced the same choice. Some have moved on, living normal lives until they died natural deaths. Others have chosen to stay, to become part of the building's protection." "What happened to the ones who stayed?" "They became the building's immune system. They keep the lost souls organized, help them find their proper floors, make sure the newer arrivals don't get lost in the maze of offices and businesses that span decades. They're the reason the building has been able to grow beyond its physical limitations." David looked at the reflection again. The other guards were nodding at him, encouraging him to join them. He realized that they weren't prisoners. They were volunteers, people who had chosen to dedicate their existence to protecting something larger than themselves. "The building is more than just steel and concrete," Maxwell continued. "It's a repository of human dreams, ambitions, and achievements. Every business that operated here left something behind, not just furniture and equipment, but aspirations, hopes, the essence of what people were trying to build. That's worth preserving." David made his decision. "What do I have to do?" Maxwell handed him a key, an old-fashioned brass key that felt warm to the touch. "This is the master key to all the floors that exist and all the floors that will exist. When the demolition begins, use it to open the door to the new meridian. You'll find it in the elevator when the time comes." David pocketed the key. "Will I still be me?" "You'll be more than you were. You'll have access to all the building's memories, all its history. You'll understand the stories of everyone who ever worked here, and you'll be able to help them continue their work in whatever form it needs to take." David left Maxwell's office and returned to the elevator. This time it took him directly to the ground floor. But as the doors opened, he could see that the lobby was different. It was fuller, more alive, populated by people from different eras, all working together to prepare for the building's transformation. He spent the next 2 weeks doing his regular security rounds, but now he could see the building as it really was. Not just 12 floors, but a complex network of spaces that existed in multiple dimensions, all connected by the elevator that defied physics and logic. On the final night, as the demolition crews prepared to begin their work, David stood in the lobby with the brass key in his hand. The elevator doors opened, and inside he could see not the familiar button panel, but a single button marked New Meridian. He pressed it. The elevator began to move, but not up or down. It moved through space in a way that David's human mind couldn't fully comprehend. When the doors opened, he found himself in a place that was both familiar and completely new. It was the Meridian as it had always been meant to be, a building that existed in the spaces between reality, where the dead could continue their work and the living could visit in their dreams. David looked at his reflection in the elevator's polished walls and saw that he was wearing the uniform of an eternal guardian, ready to protect the building and its inhabitants for as long as they needed him. Outside, the wrecking ball hit the physical structure of the Meridian, reducing it to rubble. But inside the new Meridian, life continued. David walked the halls, checking on the various businesses, making sure everyone was safe and settled in their new reality. And sometimes, late at night, other security guards would find themselves in elevators that went to floors that didn't exist, faced with the same choice David had made. Some would return to their normal lives, dismissing the experience as a dream. Others would accept the brass key and join the eternal watch. The building would continue to grow, to accommodate new souls who couldn't let go of their work, and David would be there to guide them, to help them find their place in the structure that existed beyond the physical world. The cycle would continue. It always did. Dr. Philip Reeves had been treating patients with memory disorders for 15 years, but she'd never encountered anything like Thomas Hartwell. He claimed to remember things that had never happened to him, other people's memories, experiences from lives he'd never lived, trauma from events he'd never witnessed. During their first session, Thomas described in perfect detail the taste of his grandmother's apple pie. The feel of his first kiss, the fear he'd felt during a house fire when he was 12. But according to his medical records, Thomas had been raised in foster care, had never had a girlfriend, and had never been in a fire. "These aren't my memories," Thomas explained, his hands shaking as he gripped the arms of his chair. "But they feel real, more real than my actual life. I can remember the warmth of my grandmother's kitchen, the sound of her voice, the way she hummed while she cooked, but I never had a grandmother." Dr. Reeves had initially suspected dissociative identity disorder, or false memory syndrome, but Thomas's descriptions were too detailed, too consistent, and too emotionally resonant to be fabrications. She decided to investigate further. She began by researching the specific memories Thomas described. The grandmother's house was a real place, 1247 Elm Street, owned by Eleanor Hartwell from 1965 to 1992. Eleanor had died in that house, and her grandson Michael had inherited the property. But Michael had died in a car accident in 1995, shortly after Eleanor's death. The house fire, Thomas remembered, had also been real. It had occurred in 1987, when a 12-year-old boy named David Chen had been trapped in his bedroom during an electrical fire. David has survived, but he died of leukemia in 2001. The first kiss belonged to Amanda Rodriguez, who had experienced it at age 16 during a school dance in 1993. Amanda had died of a drug overdose in 2003. Dr. Reeves realized she was looking at a pattern. All of Thomas's false memories belonged to people who had died, and all of those people had died with strong emotional attachments to those specific memories. It was as if Thomas was somehow accessing the memories of the dead. During their next session, she asked Thomas about his childhood. He described growing up in a series of foster homes, never staying in one place long enough to form lasting attachments. He'd been a quiet child, adults often describing him as absent or distant. "I always felt like I was waiting for something," Thomas said, "like my real life was happening somewhere else, and I was just occupying space until it was time to join it." "When did the other memories start?" "When I was 8, I woke up one morning and knew how to make scrambled eggs, even though I'd never cooked before. I could remember standing on a step stool in the kitchen watching my mother. Except I'd never known my mother. The foster family thought I was just a quick learner." Dr. Reeves asked Thomas to describe the kitchen from his egg cooking memory. He provided extensive details. Yellow curtains, a crack in the tile near the stove, the smell of coffee and bacon. She researched the details and found that they matched the kitchen of Maria Santos, who had taught her son Carlos to cook before dying in a car accident in 1984. Carlos had been 8 years old when his mother died. "Thomas," Dr. Reeves said carefully, "I think you might be accessing the memories of people who died with strong emotional attachments to those experiences. Somehow, you're able to tap into residual psychic energy." Thomas looked at her with a mixture of hope and fear. "Does that mean I'm not crazy?" "It means you're experiencing something that medical science doesn't fully understand. But I think I can help you." Dr. Reeves began working with Thomas to organize his memories, to separate the borrowed experiences from his own life. But as their sessions continued, she noticed something disturbing. Thomas's own memories were becoming fainter, less detailed, while the borrowed memories were becoming stronger and more vivid. "I feel like I'm disappearing," Thomas told her during their 6th session. "The other people's lives are so much more interesting than mine. They had families, relationships, experiences that mattered. My life feels empty in comparison." "Your life matters too, Thomas. You can't lose yourself in other people's experiences." But Thomas wasn't listening. He was staring at a photograph on Dr. Reeves's desk, a picture of her with her late husband, who had died of cancer 2 years earlier. "I remember that day," he said quietly. "You were at the beach. He was wearing a blue shirt, and you were laughing about something he said about the seagulls. He told you he loved you right before you took that picture." Dr. Reeves felt a chill run down her spine. Thomas was describing the exact moment the photograph had been taken, details she'd never shared with anyone. "How do you know that?" "He's here," Thomas said, his voice taking on a different cadence. "He wants you to know that he's proud of the work you're doing.
He says you shouldn't feel guilty about moving on, about being happy again. Stop it, Dr. Reeves said firmly. You're not channeling my husband. You're accessing residual memories. But Thomas continued, his voice now sounding exactly like Dr. Reeves's husband. Philip, you know it's me. Remember what I told you the night before I died? About the music box? I said I'd find a way to let you know I was okay.
Dr. Reeves's hands began to shake. Her husband had indeed mentioned a music box during his final night, but she'd never told anyone about it. It was too personal, too painful. The music box is in the attic, Thomas continued in her husband's voice. I wanted you to have it, but I never got the chance to tell you. It belonged to my grandmother, and I always planned to give it to you for our anniversary. Dr. Reeves realized that Thomas wasn't just accessing random memories. He was becoming a conduit for the consciousness of the dead. And the more he allowed them to speak through him, the less of his own personality remained. Thomas, you need to stop this. You're losing yourself. But they need me, Thomas replied, his voice shifting between different personalities. They have things to say, messages to deliver, unfinished business to complete. I'm the only one who can help them. Dr. Reeves watched in horror as Thomas's face began to change, taking on the expressions and mannerisms of different people. She realized that he was no longer one person, but a collection of consciousness, all fighting for control of his body. I can see all of their lives, Thomas said, his voice now that of an elderly woman. I can feel their love, their pain, their hopes and dreams. It's beautiful and terrible at the same time. Thomas, focus on my voice. Remember who you are. But Thomas was gone. In his place was a constantly shifting presence, cycling through different personalities, different voices, different memories. Dr. Reeves realized that he had become a living repository for the consciousness of the dead, but in doing so, he had lost his own identity completely. She tried to reach the Thomas she knew, the quiet man who had come to her for help, but there was no response. He had become a ghost among ghosts, one voice among many, indistinguishable from the borrowed memories he collected. Dr. Reeves made a difficult decision. She contacted the psychiatric hospital and had Thomas committed for his own safety. But she knew that no medication or therapy could help him now. He had become something beyond human, a bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. In the hospital, Thomas sat in his room, having conversations with people no one else could see. The staff thought he was having hallucinations, but Dr. Reeves knew better. He was talking to the dead, helping them process their unfinished business, serving as a medium for their final messages. Sometimes, families would come to visit Thomas, drawn by stories of his unusual abilities. They would sit with him and listen as he delivered messages from their deceased loved ones. Messages that were too accurate, too personal, to be anything but genuine. Dr. Reeves continued to visit Thomas, but she never again saw the man she had tried to help. He had become a vessel for the memories of the dead, a living library of human experience. He was content in his role, no longer struggling against the borrowed memories, but embracing them as part of his purpose. She often wondered if she could have done something different, if she could have saved Thomas from losing himself. But she also realized that perhaps this was what Thomas was always meant to become. Not a man with his own life, but a guardian of the memories of others, ensuring that the experiences of the dead would not be forgotten. The cycle would continue as more people died with strong emotional attachments to their memories. And Thomas would be there to preserve them, to give them voice, to help them find peace. It always did.